Okay, so I'm here. This is our first image. I'm going to start off by saying I'm editing on my MacBook Pro, and when I edit on my MacBook Pro, I always make sure that my brightness on my screen is set at 0.5%. I don't want my screen too bright because then it won't give me a true um, display of what's going on with this image. So it's always set at 0.5%. Actually, I'll take it. Yeah, it's good enough. Okay, so this image is definitely underexposed and the white balance is not 100% correct. This was done at the very end, right before the sunset. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to lift my exposure just a little bit, but I don't fully rely on exposure because I don't want to lose details in the skin and skin tone and stuff. So I just lift it a little bit until I get my white balance where it needs to be. So once I lift the exposure a little bit, I zoom in about 100%, and I take my third little tool here on the top, which is the white balance tool. I select that and I'm going to come over here and I'm looking for a white or a gray spot. And this is going to get us close to the white balance that we need to be at, and then we can manually adjust it how we want it. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this little white square right here because it looks like the whitest. Now, the Minnie Mouse jacket has some white on it, and I tried it earlier and it was really yellow. So you kind of have to play around with it, which is crazy. You would think that would work, but it didn't. So let's try this square. Definitely change the white balance. Little too yellow, too warm for me. But it's not bad. I mean, I could definitely work with that if I had to. So I'm going to go over here to her knee. It's kind of blown out. And she has some fringe over here from her torn jeans. And I'm just going to go ahead and click on that and see what we get. So that's pretty good. I'm going to move it around just a little bit. And that's the other thing, like you can move it around just like a hair in that same area and it will change. So like you just saw it changed a little bit and move it a little bit more. Didn't really change. So I actually like that better than the square over here. So I'm going to stick with that. Now it's not a perfect white balance, but it's a good start. So I'm going to zoom back out. I see a lot of yellow. I see a lot of green, but the skin tone is not too bad. So what I'm going to do, since I see a lot of green, I'm going to go over here to my tint, and I'm going to take my slider. I'm going to go over towards the pinks more. Watch the skin tone as I do that. And again, everything I'm doing is based off of skin tone, not based off the trees or the clothing or anything like that. Off the skin tone. That's my main focus when I'm editing in Camera Raw portraits. If you can get the skin tone where you need it to be, everything else tends to line up. If this image was shot overexposed, you would have other issues. But since it was underexposed, which is the better way to shoot, just because you still keep all those details. Okay, so I moved it over into the pinks, and that looks pretty good. It's a little yellow for me, so if I take that temperature back a little bit, that's a lot better. Got a lot of that yellow off of their skin from what I can tell. Another thing you can do to work on skin tone exposure is you go over to your fourth option in your panel, which is your HSL grayscale. And you want to make sure you're clicked on your luminance and go down to the oranges. If you lift those oranges up, and I'm going to go extreme, I'm going to slide it all the way over so you can see how it lightens the face. So it's too light, obviously. So let's go back to our 0. Not negative, 0, okay? And I could, if I needed a little bit more exposure on the face, I could just lift that up a few notches. And that is a really good option for exposure on the skin. And so yeah, I like it. It works really well in Caucasians, lighter skin people, darker skin people, not always, but it's definitely an option to try. And then also if I wanted a little more, like if there's too much red in their faces, I could move this one a little bit at a time. Or if I want a little more pink in their cheeks, I could move the red over. And then the same thing with the yellows, you could play with that too, or any of these sliders. But the oranges is what I tend to use the most over in the luminance. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Actually, I'm going to go one panel over, selection over in my panel into the details. If you notice my settings, it's an ISO of 640, which is not too bad of an ISO, but it will create some grain. My shutter speed is 3/20th of a second, and I definitely, because they're older subjects, I definitely could have lowered my shutter speed a little bit, in turn allowing more light in through the shutter and not having to have such a high ISO. But I didn't. It was fine. I'm not afraid of some grain, and there's great tools here in ACR to be able to take care of that grain. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in all the way to 200%, and then you can see the grain. See, the grain's not even that bad at 640, but just so you know, when you're editing some of my images, to be aware that I will shoot with ISO I have to, because it can be taken care of in post. So over here in details, under noise reduction, I just slide that little luminance over. I usually don't go past a 10 because then you start to lose a lot of detail in your subject. So I usually a 10 at the very most, not too bad. Just enough to take off that grain. But see, this is, again, it is zoomed in at 200%. So for a normal print, if I go back to 100%, that's what you're going to see. And the grain does not affect the images at all, I don't think. But I do like to just check on that, because I'm a happy ISO user. Since I'm over here in the details, I'm going to go to my sharpening tool, and I do like to sharpen my images just a hair. A really cool trick is I hold down the Option key on my keyboard, and as I slide, it black and whites my image because it gives you a better view of what is happening and what is being sharpened. So again, I just move that over just a few notches, nothing extreme at all. And then I will come down to the masking. Again, hold down that Option key, and I will use my slider. And what that does is it starts to mask off that sharpening off of the areas that you may not want it in. I want sharpening mostly in the eyes, the nose, the detail stuff, the hair. Not so much on the skin tones. It doesn't really matter. So it just kind of like pinpoints the sharpening for you. All right, so that looks good. I'm going to zoom back out. And I'm making my way back over to my main basic panel. And then I will just do a little bit more. If I feel like I need to up my exposure now that my skin tones are good, I'll up it just a little bit. I can maybe just a hair of a contrast, +2, +1. If I wanted to lift my highlights, I can. I just kind of play with it by moving these a few notches and see how I like it. Maybe I just feel like this is still a little too green, so I'm going to bring in some more pink in my tint. And that's about it for in my ACR. I will go over here to not my effects, to my lens correction. I always put on enable profile correction. It recognizes the lens that I used. And whatever you do, watch, I'll turn it off. That's before, and that's after. It just corrects any lens distortion that may have happened. And I just do it just to improve the image just that much more. So that's it for inside of ACR.